Hey everybody, and welcome this week to a deep dive and analysis into the games made by Feverdream Johnny under the publishing label of Feverdream Softworks and the secrets and overarching story those games hold. I'll probably accidentally use the two names interchangeably, but Feverdream Softworks is the publishing label and Johnny is the primary developer, in case I accidentally use one to refer to the other later on. That's not to say, of course, that other people don't often contribute to these projects of Johnny's. A few of those people listed here, mostly members who contribute to other projects related to the haunted PlayStation 1 demo disc and the community thereof. A ton of the references in Johnny's games are Easter eggs for the demo disc itself, or other popular creators I've already covered like Bryce Boer. It's sorta funny, as I made this video I was like, damn Johnny, you couldn't call back to Bryce enough, could you? And then I'd have to humble myself since I've covered Bryce in at least 4 other videos, this one making video number 5. The last thing I want to mention before we begin is that I'm not covering every game Johnny has made. Some of Johnny's earliest work is where he was still learning game design and operated on very simple gameplay and story devices, and as such, similar as to why I don't make a video on every single game on itch or Steam, I'm not going to go over games with a story that's on the tin, games that have no relation to anything outside of the game's plot, or games whose plot has already been abandoned. I'll explain that one when we get to it. Here's a list of all the games I'll be covering, where green is full coverage, orange is partial coverage, and red is no coverage, just so you know in advance what I will and won't be covering in this video. The colors are also generally indicative of their relation to the Feverdream universe, so keep that in mind as we move forward as well. With all of that out of the way, please enjoy as we look into the world and secrets of Feverdream Softworks' games. Johnny's earliest online presence I can find as a developer is as Proton Games, and while he worked on games under this moniker, I'm unsure if he published anything. You can see some public models here, and a blog post with those models in them, but this is on a blog post about cancelled games, so I'm unsure. The groundwork for Johnny's later games would be laid at this time, with controls and mechanics for the first and third person games being created and later recycled to be used in Johnny's first game published under the Feverdream Johnny name, and Peeb's Adventure, arguably Johnny's most recognizable character made to date. From here, Johnny would have a name transition from Proton Games to Proton Johnny, where he'd create a bunch of very interesting games, mainly published to the website glorioustrainwrecks.com. To quote the website, submissions are about bringing back the spirit of postcardware circa 1993. It's about throwing a bunch of random crap into your game and keeping whatever sticks. And Johnny's games around this time certainly fit the theme of the website. Johnny's transition from Proton Johnny to a very brief dalliance as Concierge Johnny would see his hosting a game jam called the Autumn Chain Game 2017, which again was filled with some interesting submissions, and then the creation of his oldest game available from the Feverdream Johnny name, which was a submission to the 2018 Scream season called Cold Wick, where you played as a character who has to survive against waves of snowmen trying to kill you. Your weapons use your own health to fire, and every 3 waves you get a new weapon. The gameplay of Cold Wick is fairly simplistic, as you might imagine, being the first game Johnny was proud enough to leave under his new name, and while it doesn't necessarily feature any secrets, there are 2 set pieces you can look at, one of which is a snowman on the toilet in an outhouse, and another is a cave surrounded by monoliths, and inside of the cave is a crystal in a basin, and a little stained glass looking frog. Or maybe it sorta looks like Peeb from a later game. It's not exactly alike, but if you look at Johnny's earliest name I could find on the internet, Proton Games on Sketchfab, showing his earliest modeling, you can see a little creature there that is obviously a very, very early iteration of another character featured in many of Johnny's games called Orbo. Cold Wick would score first place by votes, even though on my browser it says second for some reason, and would be one of the 5 winners selected by the host. The next couple of itch creations are a Unity tool, a multiplayer art gallery of Blender models, and a game called Stranglehold. Stranglehold is another wave-based survival game, where you're top down this time and survive waves of drawn faces, and can absorb them to steal their powers. This game isn't particularly special, but it is the first place we'll see the commonly drawn face of antagonists in Feverdream Johnny games. The next game is one I particularly enjoyed and is called Deep Root. Deep Root is another wave-based survival game where you feed and water a tree that's growing light on a world of darkness. Creatures come out of the darkness and try to destroy the tree, and as the game progresses, weeds infest the tree and you have to juggle another resource, Weed Killer. As the game goes on, resource veins open up as the tree's light grows and reveals more of the nearby map. There's turrets you can put on purple veins, and if you exhaust the veins, the same grinder that feeds nutrients to the tree can also be used to grind enemies. This is another really short game, as after 5 waves the tree grows to full bloom and the planet is lit. This would mark the end of Johnny's foray into wave-based survival games, and this game, which was a submission to Ludum Dare 46 for the theme Keep It Alive, would come in 451st place out of almost 5,000 entries, putting it in the top 90th percentile of games submitted. From here, a couple more Unity creation tools were created, and the next game worth talking about released was Demon's Island. Demon's Island was initially Johnny's response to the 2020 pandemic and not being able to go on a summer vacation, or anywhere for that matter, so he created an island with some in-jokes and areas to hang out online. The scope of the game, however, would expand immensely, and including the updates over the years since his initial release in 2020, Johnny would more than double the number of secret rooms to visit, include movement upgrades, add in collectible familiars, and include references to his and his friends' work from over the years. Oh, also more importantly, it's a multiplayer game, so you can play and explore with your friends on this island as well. Personally, I found 39 out of 40 of the rooms and got 94% achievement progress overall, but it doesn't have anything Feverdream Universe story related in it, so I didn't beat myself up too much over not 100%ing it. It's really fun and goofy. You should get together with some friends and try this one out for yourself. Next is a series of games created over the next couple of months called the Nightmare series, where Johnny would hang out in group calls on Discord and take ideas from the chatters in there and combine them with real nightmares he'd had, and the result is the Nightmare series. After the Nightmare series would come Johnny's first game that would garner him some real attention. The Haunted PS1 demo disc is a so far twice yearly compilation of video games reminiscent of the old PS1 demo discs that would let you try out a short demo of popular upcoming games. The Haunted PS1 demo disc is a great opportunity for game creators to showcase a proof of concept for a game they're interested in making, and generating interest from game enthusiasts also interested in what they'd create. Johnny would create a submission for the 2021 Haunted PS1 demo disc called Peeb Adventures, about a little phallic creature with a grappling hook who has to make his way through the back code of his game after getting banished from it after a mysterious entity takes over the original antagonist of his game, a dark knight named the Usurper. This game is chock full of secrets and is the first one deserving of a full breakdown from beginning to end. When you fire up the game, you're treated to a menu screen of Peeb and his buddy Orbo against an all-white background on a checkerboard plane. There's nothing to see here, so we fire up the game where we're spawned on a platform. Peeb can jump, run, use a grappler to navigate gaps and climb structures, talk to NPCs, and collect the banana pickups around the map. Immediately, we've got a secret available if we grapple to the very top of the floating platform we spawn on. At the very top, we've got an image of Bryce, who lets us know that we woke them up from a snooze, and if we don't tell anyone they're hiding there, they'll give us a cool witch's hat. I suppose, since I broke our deal, I'll continue on this video without the hat, but it does stay on your head throughout the game once you get it. Continuing forward, you run into some very bendy light posts that save your game and give you checkpoints when you approach and interact with them. You can collect a few bananas and approach the nearby well where you can talk to the Monkey King, who asks you to give him the bananas you have so far. However many you give him will be deducted from your new goal of 1,000 total bananas needed. One would presume you'd enter the nearby portals to collect the needed bananas, but as you approach them you'll find they're all disabled. Following the trail of bananas around and behind the castle though, you'll find a couple glitched out Peebs, and a banana that when you interact with it gives you the maximum number of bananas at 9,999. When you approach the well to feed the Monkey King again, you overfeed him and he explodes, opening the door to the castle. You could enter the castle, but if instead you scale the walls of the castle and get on top of it, you can find the Haunted PS1 logo, an odd meme in the courtyard, and the Haunted PS1 mascot Skelly. If you grab onto Skelly, he'll helicopter you and him up and out of the map, but if you drop on top of the castle where the crown is, you can see a very small image of Jonathan Bald, as he's called. Allowing Skelly to take you out of the map, you enter a bonus level where you can interact with a spinning apparatus which turns the object in front of you around, and it turns out to be Skelly's head. Inside of the immediate room is a cursed light post, and if you try to save at it, Skelly will let you know your progress is not saved. And here you can find some toys of the characters from Peeb Adventures, and a drawing of Peeb and Orbo. Continuing through the next room past a large fleshy Skelly's head, you can find Skelly himself, who tells you the room you're in now is the haunted PS1 commemorative hall. It's kinda cool to walk around here and check out games I was able to recognize despite their scaled down resolution to match the graphics of Peeb Adventures. Once you exit through the door of this room, it drops you back into the castle entrance, where if you turn around and try to leave through the entrance, you'll clip right through it and see a spinning Peeb. Here you can talk to Orbo, who says he's supposed to stop you but doesn't really care to, and to continue on by pulling the nearby lever. If you use the boner button while in a conversation with Orbo, he'll look disgusted at you and pause before continuing to say what he was saying. The next couple of rooms are some very light platforming and puzzle solving until you enter a fountain room with a locked gate and a blue and green door on either side of the room. Here, if you climb into the hole above the ceiling above the monkey fountain, you'll once again find Jonathan Bald. Continuing on now through the blue portal first, you enter a snowy level with deadly snowballs, tops, and a revolving door of ice. At the entrance to this level, you can pull off the head of a snowman and see a tiny Peeb, and if you climb above the door to the exit to this level, you can find the haunted PS1 logo again. Continuing through the level, you'll find a large ice chasm, and as you scale the wall, you can enter this hole with a red tarp over it to find some glitched out trees, a red key, and a head that tells you the key unlocks a hole to nowhere in the green world. Continuing out of here and forward a little bit, you can drop down a broken bridge and find a Peebified version of one of Bryce Brewer's characters, the Beast. At the top of the platforming, you can grab hold of an ice crystal that carries you to Orbo, and after grabbing a key, you can grapple another crystal to leave the level. It was here I noticed for the first time that above the second snowball launcher, if you get on top of it, there's this weird green face. Now we can exit, unlock the blue lock, and continue forward to the green world. After completing a very simple platforming puzzle, the entrance to the main green area is open, and behind the first spike wall trap is a hole where you can again find the haunted PS1 logo and a switch. Pulling the switch here unlocks a secret hallway later on, so we'll go ahead and pull it and progress past some more swinging axes until we make it to the hallway we unlocked. Here we can see some more glitched trees and the lock mentioned before, and since all that's really left to do in this level is collect the key and leave, we'll go ahead and go down this hole. As we fall down the hole, we can see we've been put in a ball reminiscent of the Super Monkey Ball games while a giant head stares at us. It looks kinda weird, but don't be too creeped out. This head was actually a friendly and wise character in Demon's Island. You can play through this level and fall down a cylinder at the end of it, where you enter an all-red room with spinning crystals, and a room at the back that looks like a church's interior with a cross on the wall. As you go through the door to leave, a light follows you, and when you reach the door, it spits you back out to the main menu. From here we can pick back up in the fountain room, and after unlocking the door and entering it, we can see Orbo on the other side of a chasm, and a wheel to help us get across. If you look behind the spinning wheel, you can see another Jonathan Bald. Talking to Orbo, he mentions that a weird freaky guy is hogging the throne. You continue down a long windy hallway and into the throne room where the Dark Knight, the usurper, sits. Peeb prepares to battle the king for the throne so Peeb can return it to the Monkey King. But before the usurper can start the fight, his head splits open and a voice speaks to Peeb called Entity 1. Entity 1's faces are originally seen in Stranglehold, an earlier game of Johnny's, but there's no story connection I don't think. The original faces had something to do with a spreading plague, and while this entity here in Peeb's Adventures seems like a virus or invader of Peeb's game, the short description of Stranglehold makes me think the faces were just recycled, not a continuity of Stranglehold. Entity 1 talks about how they don't hold Peeb's actions against him as he was just programmed to try and get the crown and to stop the usurper, but Entity 1 would be deleted when the game was reset after giving the crown to the king, so he'll be banishing Peeb to the back code, since destroying Peeb would also reset the game. Peeb is then sent through a portal to a world reminiscent of the title screen, where Orbo and several portals sit. Most of the portals don't have a cord connecting them, but one does, and is the only portal you can go through. The names of all the portals seem to be Peeb spin-off games like Peeb Star Racing, Super Peeb Out, and Rolling Star. I wonder if Rolling Star might be in the full game with similar controls as when you played the Super Monkey Ball style game from earlier. We've got a bunch of secrets here before we finish the game, so let's try and get them out of the way quickly. Between the red and blue portal, you can walk through the gate and off the map. Directly below the area you can walk out of is a corrupted area with an NPC that says, "We could create a day darker than any night," an act no mother can forgive. And again, the haunted PS1 logo and a portal. Going through the portal, you're dropped into a very tight corridor where Jonathan Bald talks about this level. This is a test level where Johnny thought about doing some Resident Evil camera type of level, but didn't have time to iron it out, so decided against it. You turn a corner and see Jonathan Bald, and can walk into his head to be spit back out to the checkerboard room from before. This is only slightly interesting, but you can actually go back into the test room the same way you did before, and when you do, the trigger to walk into Jonathan and leave is removed, so you're stuck there. The next two secrets you can find by walking through the gate again and scaling the outer wall of the back code. Below the entrance is a short comic from someone who hates this game. I say that because there's no way someone who was a fan would make something like this. Continuing on past my first probable strike on the channel, you can go to an area directly behind the portals and see a Peeb in a jar. A great injustice. There's one last secret I know of, which is if you hold the zoom in button and the boner button at the same time, after a few seconds a face will flash and you'll enter a room made out of this guy named Jet. And as you navigate, you'll find Jet in a nearby narrow hallway with a cube at the end. You collide into the cube and it spits you out to the main menu, which has become dark and corrupted, with the faces of the entity floating around and Peeb glitching out. Going back to the game to the checkerboard room, you can enter the only active portal and end the Peeb Adventures demo, where the credits roll. That's all to see here in the Peeb Adventures demo. Hey everyone, Dirk coming to you here from the editing room, where I have to say that I missed so many secrets and I have to add them in here real quick. The first secret I missed is in the entrance hall with Orbo, where behind the switch that you can pull, you can squeeze into the wall and see another Jonathan Bald and the haunted PS1 logo with some text on the wall. The next two secrets I missed were in the blue level again. So I'd showed you that if you pulled the snowman's head off, there's a little Peeb inside. But what I didn't show was that if you take the camera and clip it into the snowman, you can see a whole trio of Peebs. Then, behind the entrance to the level, there's another Jonathan Bald. In the green level, the only thing I missed here was an evil Jonathan Bald. Then, in the room where you can see Orbo before confronting the usurper, up in the top right stained glass window, you can find Tim, who says that your god is dead. The last secret I missed was one of the last Jonathan Balds in the out of bounds area of the checkerboard level. And hopefully that's all the secrets I missed. Back to the video, so we can return back to Johnny's catalog of games. The next game in Johnny's catalog is another game worth talking about called Turgor Pressure. The story goes that there's an abandoned facility under the ocean, and an exploratory dive team was sent down to investigate it. Your role is to control a remote operated vehicle sent to investigate and find the dive team, as they've been lost. The main mechanic of the game is scanning the objects in the environment and getting a report about them. On the surface, we can see a few interesting objects. The first is a normal small coral colony, and a nearby large coral colony that's undergoing a genetic mitosis. The DNA of this colony is changing in a complex fashion. Ahead, you can see the grate the dive team cut through. But if you investigate the nearby smokestacks, in one of them is a familiar face that this game calls P338. Remember that for now. The scan reveals that Peeb's diet is largely composed of Musa acuminata, or bananas. Continuing down the grate, you can analyze the bars of the grate, which confirms the dive team cut through it. Nearby, you can see a fake door that's made out of an unidentified silicone-based substance. I'm not sure what the composition is supposed to imply, but keep this door in mind also. Next, we can see a shutter that's been damaged as the team continued in deeper. Ahead, you can scan the wet floor sign, which shows, well, nothing. There's a nearby poster that's composed of chromatophores similar to the skin of squids and chameleons. The poster throbs in perfect synchronization, obviously the skin of some creature. Above your head in this room, you can scan a light that has no wiring. The light isn't actually metal and glass, but a nanoweaved chitin similar to the exoskeleton of a crab. Out of this room and down some stairs is a hallway composed of the doors from earlier. The hallway twists and contorts, and as you get to the end of it, you can see some blue cubes with red blinking faces. When you scan them, a lot of their text is corrupted, but they give you a little bit of information like their name, which is called the Morning Cube, and descriptions like, "It's alive," "The human body is like a hive," and "The den mother reshapes all." As you go deeper, you run into another cube gyrating in a colorful patch of assumedly fabric. This cube has the name Hemoglobin Cluster and says, "They will be reborn from a womb of clay." Antigens appear at the entrance of a hole you go through, likely to keep out intruders, that tells you you're a parasite waiting to suckle from the teat of a god. Another yellow cube nearby says that the den mother is nearly ready to give birth to her progeny. These cubes are all called gamete deltas, and gametes are cells that come together to birth new life in plants and animals. Following the bubbles down to the bottom of this area, you can find a very odd looking fetus. After you scan it, your mission status gets updated to return to the base immediately, and the description for the fetus fills the screen and it is corrupted. As you swim around trying to leave, an emergency broadcast appears on the screen, warning that an A-class alpha bioweapon has been detected, and to report to the nearest community bunker. While not mentioned implicitly, this might be implied that the scan starts the birthing of the fetus, which is presumably this Class A bioweapon. In real life, diseases that are Class A are diseases like anthrax, botulism, and the plague, so a pretty serious situation is going on with this birthing. Since we can see the womb slowly spreading up from this underwater facility, with the nearby coral wildlife becoming mutated, we might assume that this disease would either be the further rapid spreading of this facility, or the morning cubes attacking nearby humans along with the fetus. Unfortunately, besides some backstory and a little bit of context later on, that's all we can presume about the Turgor Pressure for now. But before we move on to Johnny's next game, let's take a quick look at Bryce Boer's Mysteries Under Lake Ophelia, which has two references to Johnny's games. They're both different fishing tackles, the first one being a Peeb fishing tackle, and the second one is a morning cube. Neither of them have any special effects in-game. Morning Cube actually has particularly low stats, but otherwise they're just references. Mysteries Under Lake Ophelia is pretty good. You should definitely try it out in addition to all of Johnny's games. Back to Johnny's games. Up next is the Let's Go Baby games 1 and 2. These I'm going to cover very briefly, as the story is unrelated and self-contained to Johnny's other work, and was purposely done badly, as Johnny became unhappy with the audience it was attracting. I'm only bothering to bring it up here for a full history of Johnny's games, and because the baby models and maps spring up in future games. The first Let's Go Baby game is Friends World, and was purported to be an abandoned MMO from 2001, with a story centered around some man who killed babies for some either psychopathic or occult reason, and that story was told through these secrets in an MMO. I'm not going to go over every little detail in this, I just want to point out a few things to remember. First is the ugly ass baby model, next is the hub area of the Let's Go Baby games, next remember this ham model, swing by the Got Milk Bryce Boer billboard, remember these dark beings with faces that look sorta similar to Stranglehold in Entity 1, and finally, remember this hallway of doors that looks similar to the hallway of doors from Turgor Pressure. Put all that in your Remember This scavenger hunt card and put it away for now, as we explore the second game. The second game is called Let's Go Baby Suffocation, and is a lot darker than the previous game, with blood and corpses everywhere. This game's story is that the story of the first game was fabricated by a frustrated developer in an effort to ruin the launch of the Let's Go Baby Friends world and get back at his employers who he felt were treating him abusively. The two games were a reflection of some of Johnny's friends' experience in the gaming industry, and after the reception of the first game, Johnny decided to quote-unquote nuke the story, effectively retconning the parts he didn't like and creating a different narrative with new context. I also forgot to mention the release of two games right before the baby games, one being a demo called Warp North and the other a short game called Candy Corn Mishap. They're both alright, but don't have any connection to the greater universe, so they not only almost slipped my mind, but also aren't being analyzed, as they don't have much going on that needs to be analyzed. The next game to be released is Powerstrife Deathmatch. Powerstrife Deathmatch plays like an old first-person arena shooter like Unreal Tournament, but this version includes a lot of haunted PS1 references and Easter eggs. This one isn't getting a full analysis simply because this video is largely about Johnny and his games, but to go over the short relevant parts quickly, we've got Orbo as a playable character, and we've got Peeb in-game who acts as a grappler weapon. On the main menu screen we have Orbo's Odyssey, the book which would be a later game released by Johnny, but for now acts as a compendium written by Orbo himself. The ARX Guardian automated turret and the panic grenades from Deep Root make an appearance. Then we have Jonathan Bald. Next, add the Misery Star to your Johnny Scavenger Hunt card. Then the last thing here worth looking into is the Mr. Mourner, which is obviously the Misery Cube from Turgor Pressure. Here we get some more very interesting context that tells the story of the Mourning Cube. There was a legend of a woman who lost all of her children to the ocean, and in her grief threw herself into the brine. For this sin, she was punished and warped, contorted beyond recognition, turned her flesh to kiln, her blood to fire, and as such a goddess was born. After this, she began her dark work to reshape all of humanity in her image. That's all to really see here in Powerstrife Deathmatch, so we move on to the next game and probably Johnny's largest and most promising project to be yet, Nowhere, Michigan. Nowhere, Michigan is a first-person Metroidvania set in a town of the same name, Nowhere, where years ago there was an experimental reactor detonation. You play as James, who is tracking down his runaway brother Alex, who went to Nowhere for unknown reasons. The progression in this game is Metroidvania, so there's a certain level of non-linearity to the game which makes me a little unsure of how to cover it, but I'll try my best. We start in an area called Nowhere Crossing, and the things you see here for now are a few police NPCs who are on the lookout for mushrooms and fungi, but have no interest in helping you find your brother. Similarly, the other non-police NPCs around are equally useless, except for Wizardo, near a fountain in the middle of the crossroads, who tells you he was expecting you, and offers you advice to save your game at the water fountains, as they act as save points, and make humans experience quantum immortality. There are a lot of monkeys in the game too, and to sum them up, they generally give simple descriptions of the things around them. Sometimes this is helpful if you're unfamiliar with something like, say, an item that exists in the game but not in real life, but then you'll get monkeys who play in leaves or love the tower they happen to be standing by. Inside of a nearby tower, I'll be calling the Rook Tower, is a wizard who gives you a jump pack, which acts as a double jump, and he asks you to get a chocolate bar for him, the Schlarp Crunch. Add that to our quest list and our scavenger hunt card, and continue through the nearby door where we can practice with our new jump pack. On these floating platforms, while hard to see, there are little dioramas of houses with the dark figures from Let's Go Baby around them. At the end of the area here is a key, which we can use back at the crossroads to unlock a new area. Before we continue inside the new area, above the door there's this neat texture and an eye. On the opposite side of the door, on the roof, there's a rare quarter we can collect. Continuing inside, we're now in the Slumber District, and we can see a vending machine we can go ahead and use our quarter on to get a health upgrade, taking our health from 100 to 125. After continuing on and some light platforming, you fall down a meat pit, and as you continue through a corridor, you might catch some of the dark figures avoiding you. At the end of the corridor is a room that has one of the dark figures from Let's Go Baby standing beside an upgrade for you called Venge. Venge is the infant state of a large scavenging plant called the Venge Night Bloom, and you can use it to travel one way through purple piping in some areas. This allows you to leave and continue on to the next area, which is an aesthetic pool bathhouse looking area with hell divers all around. No, not those hell divers. Hell divers are a unique species that can travel both underwater and on land and collect rare resources. They're oftentimes timid and shy of humans, but some grow to be pretty social and are usually the most friendly and cooperative to humans. Multiple hell divers can fragment themselves to create clusters, which is how they reproduce. A nearby hell diver asks for a quarter to scavenge from a vending machine that fell underwater, but even if you give it to him, it turns out the machine doesn't work, and he gives you your quarter back. Above water in this area, you can find a morning cube again from Turgor Pressure that says, "It's a living," and another character nearby called Ducker the Blue Duck. Add him to your scavenger hunt card. We can now exit this area and we're put into a pretty unique but familiar area, that being the spawn area from Let's Go Baby called Hell, Michigan. You can grab a blue key that you can see from spawning in here, and continue on to the lobby, where you can see the soda vending machine is turned into an exotic treats vending machine. We'll come back to this later, but for now let's look above the area parallel to the vending machine, where we can see the baby model from Let's Go Baby dancing. We can fall through the floor here where it's darker, and travel to where you can see an old baby dramatically pretending to die who gives you another rare quarter. Back in the lobby area above the vending machine are two clowns debating over the afterlife and another tube we can travel. Here we can find a uniquely 3D character called Jet, again from earlier, who unlocks a secret area for you back at the crossroads. We can now leave Hell and go back to the crossroads, where we can do a few new things with what we've done and collected so far. On a hill, and near a gravestone, is the door Jet unlocked for us, and inside we can see a world that's nearly identical to Jet's world from before, and near the end we can pick up a familiar face, Peeb, and leaving the same way we did in Jet's world from Peeb Adventures. Back up on the hill outside of Jet's world, we can find another vending machine we can put a quarter in, and this machine gives us a Slurp Crunch. We'll be delivering most of these fetch quest items just as soon as we do our first boss fight in the last accessible world. Going further across the hill, we unlock another door with a blue key and can see the new world we've unlocked is called The Garden. There's some more light platforming to be done here to travel across a dark chasm and into the mouth of a large plant. Inside are fleshy walls and weird green burning liquids, and at the end of this flesh cave we can see a gun that's sleeping. Talking to it at first startles the gun awake, but after talking, James learns the gun's name is Concord, and while he doesn't remember the exact details, he does remember seeing James's brother recently. Suddenly, they're both attacked by what we come to learn are called poltergeists. We'll get some context on this species soon, but for now, know that they're a supernatural race of creatures that all have odd abilities. This poltergeist is called the embryonic god, the incomplete angel, and as you battle it with Concord, it turns into the desperate believer, and its attacks become more quicker and desperate. After this, James and Concord team up, and that's the end of the demo. But there are a lot of cool extra things we can do real quick before we're done playing the demo. Choosing to continue to play and shooting the flesh wall blocking your path, you can talk to another morning cube that says he thinks he's in the wrong place. At the very back of the cave is a monkey that gives you a dash upgrade. If you exit this flesh cave and enter it again and look at the acid pool from earlier, you'll find a lettuce cube, which doesn't have a function yet to my knowledge, but is a cool collectible secret. Make your way back to the crossroads and hop on top of the building from the world you just entered. Aim towards the top of the Rook Tower, and there'll be an undercover police officer trying to bust the fungus conspiracy and a prairie dog. If you eat the prairie dog, it'll get added to your inventory. On the other side of the hill you were on are a dreaming prince and his dreamed friend who will die when you wake the prince up. While you're up here with your new movement upgrades, aim to go over the barrier where you started the game, and you'll find a secret area and a wizard who calls you a dumbass and gives you the "Congratulations, dumbass" mask. Now in front of the Rook Tower, you'll see another familiar face, Orbo, who's looking for his friend Peeb and something to eat. Give Orbo Peeb for now, and walk over to where you started the game. There you'll find some breakable boulders hiding in a cave with a Mr. Sprout inside. Pick him up and head into the Rook Tower and back to the wizard where we can give him his Schlarp Crunch Bar. There's no reward for doing this, but as a consolation we can destroy a bookshelf across from the wizard and use a hidden tube to travel to an odd room where we can plant the Mr. Sprout from before. Now then, travel back to the entrance of the Rook Tower and into the other door nearby, and you'll end up in the Grand Library Junction. Climb the bookshelves and you'll find the meat Orbo was asking for, which is the meat model from Let's Go Baby. And at the very top you'll find two miners outside of a cave-in. Behind a bookshelf near one of them is another hidden Mr. Sprout we can find. As we clear the cave-in and enter the rocky room, we'll run into another poltergeist, this time named Smiler, the mining poltergeist. After we kill him and talk to the miners again, they say thank you, and that Smiler used to be friendly, but one day he just snapped and attacked the miners. Headed back to the wizard and the Mr. Sprout we planted, we can see the flesh wall has a crack in it. If we enter, it's a very creepy world called Homicide Valley. This is really the only place across any of Johnny's games that really scared me, especially the ending. You fall down a hole as the textures pulsate and change colors, and after falling for a pretty long time, you land, and your camera locks on a bald human-like creature that glows and runs at you. You can't move, and he instantly gives you a game over screen when he catches you, where your only option is yes, with the words "It never ends" in the background. If you travel back to the room where you planted Mr. Sprout, you'll find the flesh wall and Mr. Sprout both are gone, with no evidence that you'd ever been here or that it ever happened. We've got one last quest line we can do, which is giving Orbo the ham. He gives us a little figurine of himself, and we can go back to Wizardo's Monkey Pit Challenge, where there's a little red hatch in the monkey pit, with room for an Orbo figure. Now we're in a familiar looking place, the courtyard of the Monkey King's castle, with Orbo standing around and Skelly spinning. Behind the castle is a bunch of dancing babies, and that's all there is to see outside here, so if we go inside of the castle, we can find Skelly in another commemorative hall. Again, there's a bunch of pictures of different games on the walls. I found myself not knowing nearly as many games, but still recognizing a few. Up in the corner of the room you can find Peeb peeking down, and if you interact with him, he says that he hates his fans. The last thing we can do before calling it quits with Nowhere, Michigan is take the prairie dog to the exotic vending machine in Hell, Michigan, and he'll crawl inside and get you an exotic candy bar. And that's all the secrets and story that there is in Nowhere, Michigan right now. Well, here we are once again from the editing room with the secrets that I missed in Nowhere, Michigan that I only came to learn here in post. This time, it's two secrets, one big and one small. The big secret is in the Slumber District in a room with a fountain before the exit. There are eyes in the walls of this room. If you jump into one of the eye walls, you'll be transported to what's called the Uncle Shrine. Here you'll see the face from some of Johnny's other games and can plant the last Mr. Sprout we found before. Then, once it kicks you back to the start of the Slumber District, Continue through the level normally until you run into Ben, who gives you a health potion, raising your HP another 25 points. The small secret I missed was in the Memorial Paradise. You can climb up the castle walls by jumping on the geometry of the level, and once you get to the very top, on the side facing the back of the castle, there's a door that takes you to the chamber of the big croissant. And that's it. I'm sure I missed more secrets, but that's surely most of them. To hear Johnny tell it, his next game came about as he was continuing development on Nowhere, Michigan, and he realized that he'd need to secure some further funding to complete development on the game. He dug through some old half-baked projects he put on the back burner and pulled from it the movement platformer in the next game we'll be covering called Orbo's Odyssey. Orbo's Odyssey starts with the titular character Orbo entering the boss of the company he works for's office to retrieve his keys. Peeb is inside and calls for Orbo from across the room. Once Orbo closes the distance, Peeb reveals that he's been stuck in the boss's room for 5 hours because the automatic door opener for the office is broken, which means they have to use the handle, and neither Peeb or Orbo have hands with which to use the handle. Orbo's frustration at being stuck is compounded with the fact the boss visits work longer than once every several months, so waiting for him isn't an option. That's when Peeb points out the nearby fabricator that Orbo will collect gears for, which will fabricate him an arm. Orbo will get these gears from the nearby doors that act as portals, unlike the door to enter the boss's office. There's no mandatory order to the progression here, so we can pick any level to play that we like to. And while there's no label on the portals before you enter them, here's a convenient map for the levels' names and their positions in the room. Before we pick a level, let's quickly look at the boss's office. The first thing that you might notice is the boss's chair is much larger than both Peeb and Orbo. Around the room we have a couple of references and Easter eggs. Of course there's a golden Peeb mounted on the wall behind the boss's desk, and on the bookshelf in a bottle we can see a very little mini red Peeb. Finally, on the other side of the desk in a fish tank are the Monkey King and the Usurper along with some piranhas. Catching us up quickly, we've obviously got the new development of Orbo and Peeb working for some boss in a new office, and with the inclusion of the Monkey King and Usurper in a piranha tank, I wonder if this is a sort of different approach to an ending for Peeb's adventure, where Entity 1 took over the game successfully, and instead of fighting Peeb and Orbo, instead employed the agreeable pair. Or it could just be a reference. I'm not trying to dig for an answer where there isn't one. You just take the evidence that's in front of you and try to draw a conclusion based off of it. So if you think I'm reaching for a conclusion this early in Feverdream Soft Products universe, you're probably right. With all that out of the way, we can finally pick a level. The first one I'm picking is the Sleepytime Manor. There are 5 gears per level, and every level has one of the gears be unlocked by collecting these little pink orbs, which act sort of like coins in Mario 64. Once you've collected the required amount, the gear spawns. Each level also features a fairly forgiving time trial, which upon completion spawns another gear. On each level there are different unique quests, like here at the Sleepytime Manor, where you solve a dispute between brother ducks with a bomb, where the blue duck Ducker makes another appearance. For each level, in the interest of cutting fat and saving you and I both time, unless the quest for a gear is pertinent to the story, I'll not be mentioning it. On every level, Peeb appears and gives you a brief breakdown of the location you're at and your company's business there. In front of the Sleepytime Manor itself, you run into Peeb, and Orbo asks him a pointed question about why this portal exists, since there doesn't seem to be any business opportunities here. Peeb answers that the boss claims this place already came, quote, formed by the unknowable hands of that great firmament, end quote. That's quite the mouthful, but the definition of a firmament is the heavens or the sky, especially when regarded as a tangible thing. We'll take the definition and combine it with Peeb's statement, say it was created by the heavens basically. The buildings, the rocks, the trees, everything was created by this firmament. When Orbo pesters Peeb for more answers, Peeb swallows a bug and the conversation ends. If you position yourself in just such a way towards the moon from a cliffside, you can discover a very funny secret, where if you hit a block way out of the main map area, it will skip you to the boss fight of the game. We'll not be doing that, and instead investigate this weird indent between 2 lights, and once you go through it, you'll find a room with another portal and windows. When you go through that portal, you'll go to another level called Divino's World. Inside is an all-black void with a computer terminal, what look like some cave etchings on the wall, and what the game calls an obol fragment. When you read the terminal, we get some very interesting information in a very interesting format about the room we're in. The first thing we get is a Zeitgeist ID of Z777, and an alias for this Zeitgeist named Divino. The numbering and naming scheme reminds me sort of the numbering and naming of the SCP anomalies, where it gets a number designation and a nickname. This point's made even stronger with some zeitgeists having a special notes section, which describes the equipment you'd want to use or the behavior to look out for to avoid being hurt by these zeitgeists. And finally, a description of what the zeitgeists actually are. I also mentioned earlier in the video to pay close attention to Peeb's designation in Turgor Pressure, which was P338. Now this brings up a number of very interesting possibilities. Firstly, we could try and figure out what P338 means. You see, Z777 obviously stands for Zeitgeist, but the supernatural creatures we run into across the games that act as bosses are called Poltergeist. So does the P in P338 mean Poltergeist, or does it simply mean Peeb? We've got a slew of other Peebs across the games, so unfortunately this isn't something we can exactly get an answer for, as we don't see a P designation used for any of the poltergeists anywhere. The next interesting thing to consider is that if it does mean poltergeist, and the P naming scheme is used like the Z naming scheme, is the organization we work for in Turgor Pressure the same one as we work for as Orbo in Orbo's Odyssey? Just something to keep in mind for a little while. Let's get back to the Zeitgeist Divino's description, but quickly let me make clear that similar to how poltergeists in the Feverdream universe aren't just ghosts, there are other words that don't mean exactly what they mean to us in the Feverdream universe or don't exist in our universe, and I'll be adding in an explanation as I understand it for those words when they crop up. Divino's description is as follows. It has been long theorized in the field of ephemerology, the study of these zeitgeists, that should the proposed ephemeron noosphere truly exist, the place of existence where zeitgeists come from, a religious zeitgeist would manifest under current culture pressures. As luck would have it, we have discovered and subsequently spoke with one such zeitgeist. Alright, let's pull out of that block of text to talk about what all that might mean in simple terms. Basically, it's not confirmed if zeitgeists come from anywhere, or just there, but if they are coming from somewhere, they're coming from what's called the ephemeron noosphere. It's also seemingly theorized that if zeitgeists are being created, they're being created from cultural fads. You see, in real life, a zeitgeist is defined as a mood or spirit of a particular time period. So what this translates to are real periods in history creating these anomalous zeitgeists in real time, and this one seems to be religious in nature. To continue, but now paraphrasing, the workers were unsure if zeitgeists were able to develop sentience, and Divino is the first one, it seems, to develop conscious thought and self-identity. It considers itself an angel, and then suddenly the computer stops working, and the zeitgeist begins talking to us directly through the computer. It says that we, Orbo, are a lot like the men who had talked to before, but also different in that we were touched by angels and given divine purpose. Divino's mother can provide answers that the scientists were too deaf to hear, but she was wounded when one of the children chose to steal her powers for himself. But before she was broken, she put her spirit into a vessel and split the vessel into 3 and set the fragments free. Orbo must gather the 3 fragments, one being in this room, and then stand by the mother and wait. And with that, we can collect the opal and look at the cave etching on the wall, which appears to be a pickaxe, some towers, a moon, and some kind of a rectangle with a symbol. We can then leave Divino's room, and the Sleepytime Manor both, and exit to the boss's office where we can pick another portal to go through. We'll go through the Schlarp City portal, which you may remember is the name of the candy bar that we gave to the wizard from Nowhere, Michigan. While they existed in Sleepytime Manor, you'll find here in Schlarp City are a lot more cardboard cutouts of people and animals. Talking to Peeb in the center of town reveals that they'd like to roll the city out to the public, but first they have to get rid of the Dracula population first. But as goofy as they look, they're apparently real Draculas. And that is what they're called, by the way. Not vampires, but Draculas. One of your quests for Schlarp City is to knock out 5 gold Draculas. There are some signs around the city, like this one that says Paging Dr. Spider, and a Winding font says, I will make you see a scary Dracula, and another sign for Everlast Liquidators, which I initially thought turned physical assets into money, but now I think they Agent 47 liquidate people. There's really nothing else to see here, but like all levels in this game, there is a secret area if you go to the tallest building and land on a platform that's on the back side of it. Once inside this other portal, we can see the name of this area is Memorygram. Memorygram has some graves and bushes outside, and a stone slab with a description written on it that says it's Zeitgeist Z909, and its name is Memorygram. This Zeitgeist has a special notes section that says because of its localized EMF manipulation, researchers have to wear personal protective equipment blocking that manipulation, and that all electronics are to remain out of the Zeitgeist to prevent it from manipulating the electronics. Which is why this information is etched on a slab instead of a computer as is normal. Memorygram manifests as an enclosed space taking on the form and function derived from activity in the noosphere. Despite mimicking man-made structures, it seems not to understand the function of human architecture, and decorates rooms and hallways randomly, and connects them that way too. It's unclear why the Zeitgeist even bothers mimicking human architecture, but the prevailing theory is that what we can observe of the Memorygram is only part of the full Zeitgeist, and what we see is the result of that Zeitgeist interacting with our planar dimension, making its mimicking unintentional. While Memorygram doesn't seem to be intentionally harmful, it is indirectly so, since its EMF manipulation can cause bouts of short-term amnesia and psychosis when exposed to it for a long time. Memorygram is currently being used to contain something called the Perfect Man, and if you enter to conduct research, be sure you bring a combat-ready poltergeist in case it attacks you. As we enter the facility, we can see this Perfect Man, which appears as a painting, the base of which says Perfect Man over and over, and the painting is a very, very faint face with blocky features. We can't interact with it for now, but continuing on further into the Zeitgeist, we can run into another fragment of the oboe. After collecting it, Perfect Man frees itself from the wall and pursues us. And if it catches us, it skewers Orbo with tentacles, pulling him into the painting. Once Orbo is fully engulfed, we're greeted to a full-screen image of Perfect Man's face, and are then dropped in a dark room surrounded by Perfect Man faces. My best guess is that we're inside of this Perfect Man, and the Perfect Man itself is a poltergeist that's somehow being contained by this EMF field manipulation. After a couple of seconds, you're dropped back into the boss's room, where you can go to the third level, the Dunbarrow Mines for us. The Dunbarrow Mines are obviously what you might expect, being a mine-centered level, but while there are other crystals around, it seems like only uranium's being mined here. Talking to Peeb here, Orbo says that he doesn't understand why the company would mine uranium if they don't own or stock any nuclear reactors, and Peeb says that the boss didn't start this place, but Peeb did, to make glow-in-the-dark paint. That's all to be said from Peeb here, and as we continue through the level up into a grassy area with tables around, we can find our first human-looking character who says he's an executive at this company. Orbo asks the executive to come and open the door for Peeb and him, but even though the executive's kind, he says that high-level employees have bombs implanted in their brains to keep them from leaving their work areas. The executive then asks Orbo to get him some delicious uranium, which he does. I guess while we're up here, there are some screaming head plants, which also appeared in some other of Johnny's games. Much more interestingly though, we can see a landscape of thorns surrounding this uranium deposit. If you're not familiar with what exactly a landscape of thorns is, a landscape of thorns is an answer to how humans can communicate across thousands of years, cultures, and languages to let one another know that the nearby area is dangerous and to stay away from it, which makes sense here since it's a uranium mining operation. If we try to fly up around where the thorns are, we can see some Draculas have this area claimed and are pointing a sniper rifle at us, but if we continue despite the warnings, we can go behind one of the thorns where some Draculas guard another portal for us to plunder. This level is named Zoetrope, and inside are some dark rooms. But thankfully Orbo starts to glow. In his glow, you may notice some humanoid shapes running around, and if they get close enough, they'll deal damage to you. After you navigate the area, you'll come across some comfortable living quarters, the last oboe fragment, and another computer. This computer says that this area is Zeitgeist Z215 and its alias is Zoetrope. The special note says to wear personal protective equipment that protects you from ephemerons and I also assume radiation. The Zeitgeist is a multi-entity phenomenon that shows itself as shadows against light. It is predatory, so it does attack organic materials by stripping the subject's electrons, melting them from the inside out. Initial theories thought that the shadows might be coming from an object, but in reality, it comes from the Zeitgeist area itself, manifesting in optical and auditory hallucinations. The hallucinations themselves are where the Zeitgeist hotspots are, and are not the actual Zeitgeist or anything else for that matter. The only people resistant to the Zoetrope's effects are supernatural beings, like poltergeists or possessed life forms. The reasoning for this is assumed to be that they're cut from a similar cloth, and have a similar polarity to the Zoetrope itself. The reaction from a poltergeist and the Zoetrope meeting is immense amounts of radiation being let off. So if you come in with a poltergeist, be sure your anti-radiation plates are secure. Since Orbo can survive prolonged exposure to these shadows, and I assume radiation is put off of Orbo as it gets close to them since it gets grainy, I wonder if this is evidence of Orbo being a poltergeist, or maybe just being blessed as Divino described does it for him. Anyways, we can pull out of the Zoetrope, back to the boss's office, and go in the last level of the game, the Monolith Station. Inside this level, we can see huge vats of a pink liquid that's called Vitagen. As we enter further, we can talk to Peeb, who lets us know we're in a highly confidential and secret area. Peeb tries to get Orbo to leave on goodwill alone, but Orbo reminds him that he needs to continue to collect gears to escape the boss's office. There's a key-shaped creating machine nearby that you can use to unlock a door with a launch pad behind it. And while there isn't much interesting stuff up here besides a gear, there is something I consider to be fairly interesting. You see, Monolith Station is covered in doors. There's a door here in this grassy picnic area. There's doors in an observation area and control station, where you'd assume you'd normally see researchers. There's doors in some hallways, and doors even by some mining equipment. There are normal doors around, don't get me wrong, like the boss's office for example. But otherwise, to go to these zeitgeists and to enter the levels, you walk through these portals that look like doorways. Now I've had you keep in mind the doors from the other games that have a similar sort of look to these doors that are all around Monolith Station. Now Monolith Station doors do have lights behind them, and glass in the makeup of the doors, and the doors I've asked you to remember look sorta different. I've got about an 80% confidence that all of these doors in Monolith Station, if they were to be open, would be portals, but I also wonder if Turgor Pressure took place in the same timeline, if all the doors might have acted as portals for the facility that would house and study the Morning Cube's mother and fetus until it got out of control and the facility was lost. Now that the story of Let's Go Baby has been done in, I don't think it necessarily has anything to do with the Greater Soft Products universe, but I do think that the doors had the same general idea when writing them. Again, kind of grasping at straws here, but that's just something I thought about as I played across all these games. Continuing on, we can discover the purpose of this facility is to mine these crystals, which were part of this monolith, called exoferrous crystals, and store this liquid Vitagen, which is the liquid souls of beings, and infuse the crystal with the liquid through a synaptic connection to make these magic gears. If you crawl behind the key-shaped creating machine, you can find a similar face in an unnerving room, but maybe face isn't the right word, because this is a silhouette of the incomplete angel from nowhere, Michigan that has some really interesting information for us. When you talk to it, it says that millions of years ago, an angel fell to earth. She was unable to return to heaven, and so she mourned and mourned. When she grew tired of misery, she used a forbidden magic to create mankind, and so she was happy for a while, as the humans would adore her and worship her, but as with any child, they would visit less and less until they forgot about her. After she was forgotten, her furthest descendant would rediscover her one day and steal her magic from her, and with this magic, the human realized he could revert humans to their core firmament, a glowing liquid soul. It could empower the inanimate with sentience, and with this birthed the poltergeists. The man built an empire around the angel's power, with gears that could be formed into anything, living machines. The mother was left alone in Monolith Station, tethered to circuits that would unravel more of her secrets, and she had never felt more alone. Now we do have all the Orbo fragments, and we are in the place to use them, but for the sake of telling the story of this game in a certain chronology, let's take our 20 gears back to the boss's office and construct our prosthetic arm. Once we have it fully constructed, we can then open the door to the boss's room and leave. Peeb exits the company, but as we go to exit, we're called to the HR department for a meeting. One of the last secrets here is if we line ourselves up with the door and launch ourselves into the window on the left side of the room, we'll see a door, which we can now open with our new arm. Inside are a bunch of ducks and a character we haven't covered yet, called the Liquidator, who had a brief side quest back in Monolith Station. He works for the Everlast Liquidators that we saw a sign for back in Schlarp City, and he looks a little bit like the Agent 47 I mentioned before, but that's all that there is really to him. Also in the room, we've got the blue duck named Ducker doing a head spin on the dance floor, and a sign that says this place is called the Corkscrew. Finally, we can see the ham we've come to see in a few games now on a table that we can eat for an achievement. Exiting the Corkscrew and actually entering the HR office, we can see the HR rep is a giant floating saucer that looks similar to the saucer that dispensed bombs from the Sleepytime Manor, except for, of course, this one's floating and has a face. The HR rep asks Orbo about a missing and presumed stolen stapler, to which Orbo replies indignantly that he was just locked in the boss's office for hours and had to use a bunch of gears to construct a prosthetic arm to get out. The HR rep then asks Orbo to pay for the gears $1,300,000,000 for his new arm. Obviously, these two can't come to an agreement, and so the first and only boss fight of the game starts. You have to dodge rockets and lasers of the newly named HR rep called Sir.Gen, an experimental weapon system, and when it goes to launch a bomb at you, hit it back at that surgeon. and bounce on its head to beat it. You do this, and after 3 times it gets faster and harsher with its attacks, and after another 3 times, you finally beat it. The machine then announces that the poltergeist inside of it just wanted to live again, and that it is successfully erasing itself with its death. A big explosion then happens as Peeb exits the factory, and Orbo comes up behind him saying that him and HR had a disagreement. He's probably just gonna quit. Peeb decides to also quit so that the two can go adventuring together, and that's the end of Orbo's Odyssey. Alright, I only missed a few secrets in this game, I think. The first is the Let's Go Baby model in the grinder room at the Monolith Station, then the Let's Go Baby model again outside of the arena where you fight the boss, and then finally there's also a trio of baby models in the Schlarp City world on the window of the building housing the Zeitgeist store. And then finally, a really small simple secret. If you interact with the Fabricator a bunch of times while not having any gears, it kills you. And hopefully that's all the secrets I missed in Orbo's Odyssey. But I did promise you a couple more secrets back at Monolith Station, so if we go back there and stand beside the big pink monolith, while having collected the 3 Obel fragments, the screen will turn purple and Orbo's face will be uncomfortable, and after a few more seconds, you'll be warped into a first-person view of an all-purple area. As you look around, you may notice that it's an untextured version of the area with no NPCs of Crossroads from Nowhere, Michigan, complete with the Rook Tower and the fountain in the middle area. As you walk around, you'll eventually run into a purple outline of a star that tells you that you're too late, that this star is our oldest mother, the one who bound our soul into our body. We instinctually know her name, which then populates itself, and says that it's the Misery Star. Now I asked you to remember the Misery Star from Powerstrife Deathmatch because it has a description we can use here that says, Misery Stars aren't inherently malicious, rather, they're lonely. They lash out from a lack of love, not a place of hatred. This gets an added layer of complexity with another item from the Powerstrife Deathmatch called the Blast Star, which seems to be a younger version of the Misery Star. Do you want another layer of added complexity? Johnny shares progress updates for items, characters, levels, and mechanics that are coming to his games on his Twitter. And some time ago we saw an item coming called the Sentient Light that looks more like the Misery Star than the ones from the Powerstrife Deathmatch. I'm not even going to speculate, but all the descriptions for all these items have been shown if you want to draw your own conclusion about the Misery Star across the games. Getting back to what the Misery Star in Orbo's Odyssey has to say though, she says that originally she was much bigger than the tiny monolith we saw back at the station, but over time her youngest son, the boss, carved away at her until nothing was left but a slab. Before then, the Misery Star had been attacked, but she had never been held hostage like this before. She tried to create life that could understand her, but each time a descendant would lash out at her in wrath, so she would have to destroy humanity, and this would happen time and time again. In this generation, Orbo was supposed to be the one to attack the Misery Star and reset humankind, but before Orbo got the chance, before Orbo was even born, the Misery Star had been imprisoned to give humankind absolute power. The boss used the complacency of Orbo as an employee to stop him from ever having the opportunity to discover and battle the Misery Star. This is the final cycle, as the Misery Star doesn't have the power to stop humanity anymore, as most of her power is in humanity in the boss's hands, basically the god of this new age. The Misery Star doesn't know what kind of man the boss is, whether he wanted the power for himself or to stop the cycle of humanity's destruction, but she supposes it doesn't matter, as the outcome is out of her hands now, and therefore meaningless. She'll send Orbo back to the company with no memory of this meeting, but Orbo is welcome to come back and have this talk again anytime he'd like to. So, we've got a large chunk of the puzzle solved with that encounter. We know that this grand firmament mentioned earlier was this Misery Star, who's also the mother of the Divino Zeitgeist we talked to earlier. We also know that this star came from the heavens and that she was the birther of humanity. Orbo had divine purpose, but it was preemptively stolen from him by the enigmatic, unseen boss, who has taken chunks of the Misery Star monolith as a shell and infused them with the liquid human soul to create these gears and an empire of poltergeists. The last secret to be found is in a grinder room where we launched the liquidator into in an earlier quest. The grinder normally kills you, and when talking to NPCs you're invincible, so launch yourself into the grinder and speak to the liquidator at the same time, and you'll go through the spikes and down into an area where you'll need a key to unlock this big door. Once you get the key and fall down into the grinder again, a big white area will open. When you walk into it, you'll end up in the dev room. Here, you can talk to Johnny about the development process for this game, and talk to Ben about the artistic direction of the game. Johnny will also talk about the story of the game, and some of the parts that might have been harder to understand without context. Talking to Johnny, he says that there is of course similar terminology like Poltergeist and Vitagen across his games. Basically, Nowhere Michigan and Orbo's Odyssey take place in the same universe, but on different timelines, the diverging point being just before the beginning of Nowhere Michigan. Millions of years before Orbo's Odyssey, the brothers from Nowhere Michigan, James and Alex, also existed, but instead of Alex simply going missing, he's killed in an explosion from the experimental reactor. James then encounters the Misery Star, and because of his brother's death, fights the Misery Star who kills James. The Misery Star is deeply disturbed that one of her creations would attack her, and so begins the cycle of erasing humanity and recreating them to try and get it right. Unfortunately, this never happens, as with each cycle there's one usurper who acts as the one who's destined to attack the Misery Star. This current cycle's usurper was supposed to be Orbo, but before Orbo even existed, the boss took the Misery Star's power away and imprisoned her, stopping the cycle and creating the industry of poltergeists around gears that create creatures similar to the boss of the game. If not for the boss's meddling, Orbo would have attacked the star and reset the cycle, but his destiny was halted before he was even born. This might explain why humans look so different from Nowhere Michigan and Orbo's Odyssey. With all the newly added context, we can sort of make generalizations about the universe and the entities inside of it. Firstly, we have poltergeists. Poltergeists are creatures that have supernatural powers and generally have wildly different functions and abilities. Smiler, for example, is a mining poltergeist. The incomplete angel's function is unclear, maybe a servant for the mother, but its abilities are lasers and calling down heavenly beams. And Sir.Gen is an experimental weapon molded with the human purpose of combat. Zeitgeists are mystical areas with unique functions as well, which actively are created from the culture of society. Some Zeitgeist abilities seen so far have been a room that steals electrons and melts humans in a predator fashion, the ability to manipulate EMS, which has the human extended function of containing a dangerous, seemingly poltergeist creature, and another Zeitgeist which acts as the word of the Misery Star, the Mother. There are a lot of things that are unanswered, like whether the Turgor Pressure area was a poltergeist or a zeitgeist, or maybe nothing, I suppose, whether they were being studied by the boss's company, or if it was even related in the ways I assumed. But unfortunately for us, that's all of Feverdream Softworks' games for now. I do hope that you found this video entertaining, and in the description below, if you saw a game you thought looked fun, try playing it yourself where I've linked it. Almost all of Johnny's games are free, except for Orbo's Odyssey, which is fine. It was a ton of fun, and I'm excited to play his next game, Orbo's Odyssey 2. I think the next time I would do another analysis on this universe would be after several more games come out, or if a really big game was put out like Nowhere Michigan. And if I thought it had enough information in it, it might be a lore video. I'm really excited to see what Johnny comes up with next, but I feel like this is a really good breakdown of his work so far, and the universe that he's created, and I'd want to see some more before I covered it again. With that, I'd just like to say thank you if you've watched this far, and I'll see you all next week. Later!